Hi, this is Betsy Sawyer Galen, and you're watching Ready to Heal. This is a show about alternative healing. We're talking about all kinds of alternative healing. And today my guest is Jamie Verrillo. He does something called Access Consciousness bars, right? Access conscious, or just Access Consciousness?
Well, the bars is a process that we do on people, but the tools of access that I use with the animals are probably what we'll talk about today.
Okay, and he is also, he's here today. We're going to mostly talk about the fact that you are an animal facilitator, you
Yes.
call it. So tell me, what is that exactly, and how does it work?
Well, for me, the way that works is I've always had the capacity to be with animals. It's just one of these things that always felt like light and fun and easy for me. So,
Did you have pets as a kid?
you know, my parents weren't like real like pet friendly kind of like so, but every once in a while I would pick up a stray dog and bring him home. Yeah. So, but we had goldfish and things, and I lived in the suburbs.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I didn't really have a lot of exposure to animals, but there was, some things kind of like triggered my capacity and awareness around that because I spent 20 years in the racing industry, and like, how did that happen? It was like one day I walked into the racetrack and it was like, wow, I can do this. I know how, without any kind of formal training whatsoever.
And did you ever race horses before?
Oh yeah, I was in the harness racing industry. I drove horses. I raced at Yonkers down the road here, and about a dozen other tracks up and down the East Coast.
So did you ride horses as a kid, or?
I remember maybe once as a teenager going with a bunch of people to a horse farm, and I don't know that I was one of the ones that actually got on, but there's a story in my book, and I don't want to give all that. So, and anyway, yeah. So there was an event that triggered me showing up like at the racetrack, and it was like someone just, kind of like plugged me in, and it was like, wow, this is really cool. Yeah, I can do this.
So no, you said you can do this. You can race horses, or you can
just to be with the animals again. Was like the capacity that I had just to be with that energy was it was really easy.
So,
yeah.
And how would you describe that? Like you, a lot of people have been to the racetrack, but what is the experience that you had that made you say, I can do this? I can feel the energy of the horses.
Yeah, I was and I looking back on it, everything makes total sense to me now. But back then, it was just like I hadn't figured anything out about energy. I didn't know what energy was. I didn't know what being conscious, being aware, and being present and all that was at the moment. And but I just had this capacity. It was a gift, I'll say, because one of the things was I was always good with troubled horses. Troubled horses used to show up at my barn, and I seemed to get along with them. Yeah,
and how did you know they were troubled? How did they happen to show up at your
Other
barn?
people couldn't deal with them. They were either, they were horses that just had a lot of energy and they couldn't control them, or they kicked or they bit, or, people put a label on them, this horse is no good, and, and I would always see. It's amazing what I could, thinking back on it, I was able to see beyond the stories and just see what I do now when I work with people and animals is actually see the being.
Uh-huh. And so describe that a little bit.
It's
because it's kind of
I know.
Concept is kind of out there, but if you could sort of...
to put it into words, it's like we were having a conversation earlier, it's not a linear thing.
Right.
It's like when you're with your dog and you're just like sitting with her, you feel peaceful, you feel relaxed, you feel connected with her, right?
Right.
So picture that with horses. When what I was saying earlier is horses present an invitation for people to step into. They're just they're conscious, they're present, they're healers.
Now, we were talking about my dog before, and I know I told you this before, that I feel like my dog showed me how to have my heart open all the time, because I became aware with her around me that her heart was always open, and that was like that was a real revelation to me, and I think that's one of the many benefits of having a dog, and people don't always consciously realize that. Now, is that what you feel with the horses too? Is it a matter of their
What
heart?
you just described is what Gary Douglas, who's the founder of Access Consciousness, and it was the tools of Access Consciousness that led me to where I am now, that got me to busting open more awareness around animals and writing my book. And I'm mentioning him because in his book, this is exactly what he talks about, is being willing to receive the gifts that animals have for us. And that's one of the things that I always was able to be with and to receive those gifts, just like you receive from your dog. So if you're doing that, like I work with animals a lot, and you're doing that on a daily basis, I was telling you about the shelter that I work with,
Right.
constantly doing that work, like going to the gym and exercising, and it just becomes, you just get more and more of that, and I just get, I'm just like, okay, what are you going to show me now? And the thing about it is, in doing this work is, one of the most important things is to be in the question. Again, when I spoke about the linear, not being linear, it's not something that is cognitive so much in your mind. So the question is, it's like, ask the questions, like ask and you shall receive. It's like one of the, universal laws, ask and you shall receive. It's like, so, okay, so what can you gift me today? What's her, Bunny?
Bunny, yeah.
Bunny, your dog, right? So yeah, what gift do you have for me today? When you're willing to be in the question, it starts to open doorways and pathways into the awareness and to connect with that energy. Because energy is basically our first language, but we've buried it. It's been kind of like lost in our world because of the reality of everything that, that takes place with us, with, you name it. Name one thing that, stands in the way of us, like dogs don't have cell phones, they don't deal with computers, right? So all that stuff kind of like, it's like dumbed down the awareness to be and recognize what that energy is in the language of it.
So when I just have to go back to this because I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Like when you walked in and you first realized, okay, I have like an affinity to these horses that is unlike what most people have. I have some sort of connection here, and I feel it. What is that? What did you feel?
Well,
what did you notice?
It's not something I can say like specific, but for me, okay, I was always aware, and I would pick up people's thoughts, feelings, and emotions as a young child. And it was a bombardment of stuff. I was brought up very strict, kind of Catholic Italian. I went to Catholic grade school and in high school, and all of that I took in from that, or I should say I resisted from that, I felt wrong most of my life because I was picking up everything and thinking that it was mine. People's thoughts, feelings, and so I was constantly thinking there was something wrong with me. And in that world that I had kind of came to that conclusion, I kept making myself smaller. And when I got to the racetrack and I got to being with the horses, it was like, oh, look at this. Animals, they're not going to judge me. They don't care what I look like. It's like they present this invitation that you can step into. I wasn't able to, that wasn't available in my world. So that was big. And it helped me to function. It was like, wow, this is what I was meant to do.
And so how did you start getting involved?
It just happened. It just, I showed up at the racetrack and I was exercising horses within a week, where most people, it might have taken them months. I had no fear of the animals.
Did you ask if you could exercise the animals?
It just happened. I don't ever remember. I think one day it was a muddy track, and the trainer was.
And you just wanted to hang out there because
I
liked the
love
feeling of it.
Are you kidding? Yeah, to get away from people and that lifestyle that was, that I had felt that made me wrong, and yeah, so it was a muddy, rainy morning, and the trainer that I worked for, he wasn't the most energetic person. So in order for, to get his horse exercised, someone, he would have to put on rein. And anyway, so, oh, do you want to jog this horse? Sure. So, there was my opportunity, and that's how it started. And I never looked back. And
now,
from,
how did you jog the horse? You got on the horses, so you rode it, or you?
well, these are harness horses, so there was an exercise cart, with a sulky, like Yonkers, the
Oh,
two-wheeled
okay.
things. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And it started a 20-year racing career for me.
And did you find like certain horses you connected with more than others?
Um, I've really, looking back on it, like, again, I wasn't really consciously aware of, like, oh, I'm connecting with this one more, or this one's less, not, it wasn't like so cognitive for me. It was just like, this is what I'm doing. I have this gift. This is kind of like, wow, this is fun. It was easy. I loved it. I owned horses. I trained them for people, and traveling around. I had some wonderful experiences.
So,
Yeah.
But when you're saying like you had a gift, like what did you do with the horses? So you exercised them, and they seemed to respond to what you were
Yeah.
asking them to do better than they responded to other people?
It wasn't, no, I wasn't, again, I wasn't, this, it was just a knowingness that I have. It's even more now. Like, everyone has some sort of knowingness in something, and I'm sure you do. Whatever it is that you do. Everyone has something that they do extremely well, and, if they're not even aware of it, if they asked enough questions and maybe use some of the tools that I used, it would be uncovered. So that was the thing for me, and that's the whole thing about Access, and their mantra is knowing that you know. This was my knowing, my capacity to be with animals. Again, it wasn't something linear, cognitive. It was just an energetic knowingness. And so for years after that, I dabbled in the healing arts, looking, okay, what's my purpose, and, looking for answers of what can I do better, how can I be better, and, how can I get rid of this wrongness that I have of me, and, or what's wrong with me. I was asking all the wrong questions until I found Access. When, someone says, someone asked me the question, what do you know? And then, they gave me a process at what's right about me that I'm not getting. I was asking the wrong question.
Oh, well, that sounds right. That sounds right. So, how did you got into Access consciousness as a result of working with the animals?
Well, I got out of horse racing in '92. So then I spent 20 years dabbling into the healing arts. And about 6 years ago, someone introduced me to Access. And it was just like the light bulb went on. Again, it was something that made me feel light. It made me feel empowered to do what I do. And the question, it was like, it sounds so simple, and these tools are very pragmatic. It's not anything like esoteric that, you need to go in caves and meditate for 20 years. But it's these questions of, what do you know? And it was like, and it wasn't like I got like this answer like immediately, through, few years of having my bars run. And what do I know? I know how to be with animals. I raised horses for 20 years. This is my knowingness. So when I started to recognize that this was a capacity and a knowingness for me, and continued to ask more questions, and then showed up with a willingness at these rescue places like the shelter and some horse rescue farms, these doorways and pathways of awareness of being with animals just started to open up for me.
So tell me about, we were talking a little bit earlier about how this is something that I had heard before, and you said it's true. Like a horse's presence is bigger. Is that what it is? A horse's presence is bigger than a dog's, or you're saying that how you communicate with them is a little different?
Well, horses are healers. They have, anyone that's ever been around horses, there's a presence there with them. They're in present. All animals are. They're so much more conscious than we are, and I would just say that horses are here, and You know, I don't like to say that, you know, one animal is better than another because it's different, but
Right.
but there is something very special and interesting about the horse's presence. And again, I mentioned, you know, how they present this invitation for people to step into. And I see it all the time when people, even someone, I would just did a class about a month ago, and for some people, we were playing around with some energy processes with this one horse, and he was just like so kind.
What kind of energy processes were
These
you?
processes and access, it's there's energy processes specific to things that you want to change in their body. But the point that I'm trying to make is there were people there, a couple of women that had big time fears of being around animals and especially horses.
Oh,
And
just being around them or riding
well, just you
them?
know, being next to them. We weren't riding this horse; we were doing energy work on him. But it was just amazing what happened. How we along you know, I say we, it was the horse, like they, you know, it's like they know this language. You know, they know the energy. They know kind of what's going on, what we're doing, and what's coming. So there was a space that was created. Again, I'll use the word an invitation for these people to step into. That was just easy for them. And they got their hands on the horse, and they're kind of like looking at each other and looking at me, and the other facilitator was there. Was like, wow, I can't even believe I'm doing this.
Because normally they were afraid of doing
They
that?
had some sort of point of view or maybe some sort of traumatic experience that kept them away from.
Because I know they use horses to work sometimes with special needs
Absolutely.
children.
Sure.
I know they're kind
Therapeutic riding,
of
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, again, you know, because
Is that something that you're involved in?
not specifically right now, but I have done that in the past because they're healers.
Yeah.
They're willing, you know, they'll show up and be willing to be anything.
And so how does that work for somebody who's got special needs?
How does it work? I mean, how does
Yeah, like if you're
the
trying
interaction?
to, yeah.
Well, I guess the best way I could describe that is when someone says something about, you know, like special needs kids, people like that, those people are probably more aware, more connected with the energy than we are.
Yeah.
People that don't have special needs.
I would,
And the animals recognize that
Uh-huh.
because that's where they function.
Right.
It's the energy. It's like they just know.
uh-huh. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. You know, in dolphins, I'm sure you've heard the same thing with
Right.
dolphins as well.
Right.
Yeah, they just know. Yeah. And so there's a healing connection there. There's that kind of
Just
like,
in caring for the horse or in riding or in just being around?
I would say yes,
The
yes,
horse.
and yes.
So everything. Just
Yeah.
any kind of contact is a
Sure.
good thing. Ah.
Yeah.
And so you were telling me also that you work in a shelter and you work
do.
with dogs,
I do.
a lot of dogs.
Lots of dogs. Yeah.
And so, and tell me again, the energy of a dog feels different than the energy of a horse to
It
you,
does.
correct? Or
Yeah, it's energy that, you know, I'm connecting with, but with the dogs, I think I told you I'm working with a lot of pit bulls, and if you told me 2 years ago this is what I'm going to be doing, I never would have believed it. As much as I love animals and get along with them, this shelter has been an incredible classroom for me. I've learned so much from these dogs. They have taught me so much.
Wow, like
Yeah.
what?
The pit bulls, for instance, when I first went there, you know, I didn't realize that I had taken on a lot of what this reality puts out there about pit bulls. What do they tell you? You know, they're bad, they bite, you know, da 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 da. And you know, as much as I was working around animals and doing the work that I do, you know, it wasn't apparent to me that I was still holding on to that point of view, but they let me know it.
How did they let you know it?
Well, these pit bulls they have so much energy, they have so much potency, and with all that, they can be a little rougher than some dogs, and they play a little bit harder.
Uh-huh.
And it can be misidentified by people as aggression, where that's their way of functioning and communicating.
Right.
So what it gave me was an opportunity to show up bigger, with more space, and with more potency in the world. They showed me how to be more.
Oh, that's
Where, yeah,
interesting.
yeah, they were. They're
Is that why a lot of people like to have pit bulls?
could be. So, some of them it's like, yeah, they, it's, I look at it from a different point of view. As I was telling you before, I kind of like, with the axis, like turns things up on its, upside down as far as like looking at things. Because I look at it as the animals are choosing us. You ever see the bumper sticker that people have on the back of their cars? It's like a paw print. It's like who rescued who.
Oh yeah, yeah, I have seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. So, how do you work with cats as well?
I have worked with cats.
And what have you learned from cats?
Cats are it's a different type of energy.
When you're working with these animals, what exactly are you doing with them?
Well, the first thing I do is ask a question. It's like, okay, is there anything I can contribute to you here? And what can you contribute to me that would allow, a greater space to function from and change whatever it is that, they might want to change and what's required here. Again, using the tools of access. So the tools are, basically changing something, changing the energy of something, changing the pattern of something, getting rid of points of views that kind of like they stick us. But I'm talking when I say us people, but they work the same on animals, and they seem to work quicker because you don't have to go through the kind of like the mind. It's like you're just anyway. So cats, my first experience of working with cats, a friend of mine asked me to go to a cat shelter. It was an animal shelter, but there were mostly cats, and I never got to the dogs this day over in Vermont. And again, the most difficult, I'll say, well, the difficult cases of cat, I don't know how they just showed up and they seemed to find me. So I was just playing around with this stuff in the beginning and doing some anyway, the wind up was with these cats is, and I wasn't, here's the thing of doing this work is I've been, it took me a while to get to what I'm doing, and anyway, what I'm trying to explain is that I don't have any vested interest in the outcome. I just do it without thinking that this has to be done, without coming to the conclusion or whatever. And it just creates more space and more possibilities of things to happen. So I'm saying this because when I spoke to my friend maybe like a month later or whatever, she said, oh, by the way, such and such got adopted, and such got adopted, and they did end up changing the name of this other. So, things happen. How do they happen? I don't know. I just know that.
Let me ask you a question. So when somebody wants to hire you to work with an animal, how does that work? Say for example, my dog has congestive heart failure. How do you help me? Can you help make her better with it? Can you?
Well,
make it easier to deal with it. How do you work with animals?
If someone's looking for me, they have a pretty good idea of like going on my website and kind of see like what I do. So,
But what do you do? Do you work with
I ask questions.
I ask behaviors,
yeah.
Or do you work with health issues?
Is there something? Yeah, whatever it is. Like, what are you trying to accomplish here? What is it? Is there something that is there something that you want me to do for your what is it that you want to change? Is there?
Would you be able to help me with my dog's having congestive heart failure?
It's possible.
What's the kind of thing that most people would call you for?
Usually they're trying to figure out like why is their animal acting like this.
So it's really behavior issues mostly.
Mostly behavior issues, yeah.
And then sometimes they're connected with a health issue or just
health issues because animals are they're here in service, and they will take on someone else's the owners, like stories of animals having cancer, and there was an animal story in Gary's book about an animal that had cancer, and what they found out was that the person was the animal took on cancer, I believe, and you have to read the story. And but it was an indication. Someone had the awareness that, where did they get the cancer from? How did it? And it was, as a surrogate kind of thing. So yeah, so I can't give you like, this is what's going to happen, and it's I ask the questions and I just get awareness, especially if I'm working with the person, the owner, and the pet. I both of them are there, and I'll start asking questions, and I get information, from the animal, and then.
So you facilitate healing for the pet, or you facilitate an understanding of whatever the issue is that they're
both.
working on.
Yeah.
I want you
and
to,
most of the time.
I wanted to also show Jamie's book, and Jamie, can you just tell us a little bit about it? It's called "Are You as Aware as Your Animals?"
Yeah, it's it's a short story. It's a short read, and it's been inside me for long time, and it just popped out, and it's a little bit of a story, a kind of condensed story about me and my life with horses and that, and yeah, got to read the book.
Okay.
It's also available on Amazon, so you can get it like through Kindle.
Oh, okay. All right,
Yeah.
great. So can you give me an example? Can you think of any examples of an animal that, like an extraordinary situation where you kind of turned around something
Extraordinary, yeah. Oh, well, in the book there's an extraordinary story, but I'll give you another with a horse. There's an extraordinary story that's taking place right now. I'm working with a dog from the animal shelter. I've worked with her for 3 years. 3 years. Where did that come from? For a year now. She's a pit bull mix, and her name is Snickers. And when I first came to know her, she was totally unruly. No one could walk her. She would bite the leash. It wasn't a leash, it was a chain. She was like super reactive to other dogs. She wanted to go after them. Very, I thought it was like really, it looked like aggressive, like she would hurt. But again, as I started to get more familiar with how these pit bulls, act, it was just a way of her, she has a lot of potency, this dog. And I just started working with her. And, again, she found the shelter, me, and, anyway. So I started doing processes on her. I started, using the tools of access on her. And from a year now, she's been at the shelter because she's a very peculiar case. She grabbed someone one day. She was in a section that was where she could be adopted, but they put her in back, kind of like stepped her back where she can't be adopted. She grabbed someone's jacket, one of the workers there, and it was a playful thing. When she greets you with her mouth open and her tongue hanging out. She was a stray. She was picked up. She was living in the wild for a while. She had pups that were abandoned.
Oh.
This is like her shaking hands with you. But if people don't realize...
If they don't understand.
Yeah,
right.
like she'll come and greet, but I correct her. I use the tools and, I almost on a daily basis, there's only me and 2 other women that are able to walk her. The unfortunate thing about it, not that I try to look at that as unfortunate, but she can't be adopted because of what she did, and they have these rules and regulations about pit bulls. If a pit bull bites someone, draws blood or whatever, they can't be, because it's a state-run facility, they can't be put out. So, but anyway, this dog has been one of my greatest teachers. She has taught, you talk about animals speaking to you energetically. Right. She's just like, she's so much like me. She's like, I tell people, she's like, it's like, if you could, diagnose a dog that, that's autistic, it's like, it's her. But, again, I don't see that story that everyone, be careful around her and that, it's like, her and I are like 2 peas in a pod. And I go and walk her, and there's no more chain, there's no more muzzle on her. she'll do all the commands that I have her do and sit and lay down and and she barks when she has like this aggressive kind of like bark at people. And the first couple times she did it, I actually got startled, and she kind of scares people. But I saw through that, and it's not really aggressive. It's just her way
It's
of
her
communicating.
Jamie, we have to wrap up, but thank you so much, my guest, Jamie Verrillo. And this is Betsy Sawyer Galen saying join us next time on Ready to Heal.